Well, Tom, I wanted to mention your theme of trickle-down fascism, and I wanted to isolate one of the main causes of trickle-down fascism, and that's how we funded our wars in the last 20 years. And it really ties together something that you've said repeatedly, which is that we're funding wars on credit cards. We're talking about the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. We're talking about Trump funding the war in Yemen, bypassing Congress completely. And we're talking about Biden in December sending bombs and tank ammunitions over the objections of the U.S. senators who said that it's unconstitutional what he's doing. There's a brand new report, and this is Elizabeth Warren saying if the Biden administration won't be transparent with Congress and the American people, Congress should act and close these loopholes for arms sales for Israel. And we're talking about $150 million that went for the artillery shells that will keep bombing civilians. And we're talking about 14,000 rounds of tank ammunition, $106 million. And this is at the moment when the polling shows 46% support military aid. That means 54% are opposed. And among Democrats, 80 to 90%.
A large percentage of people who are no opinion, too.
Well, you've got Democrats polling 80 to 85% for a ceasefire, and this thwarts it unconstitutionally. I wanted to give you three scenes because Korea and Vietnam pay as you go. They raised taxes to fund World War I, World War II. Eisenhower insisted we pay as we go. And what Linda Bilmes has done in her new book, about the ghost budget, is to show that in the land, and she's a Kennedy School professor. She just wrote in Just Security. It's a big new book coming out. The post-9/11 wars have allowed the thing that you talk about all the time, which is that we get huge unfunded liabilities, deficits. They are accompanied by tax cuts on the wealthy. And then when the budget deficits come along, we use the budget deficits that were to fund the military to then have austerity that results in cuts for people's needs and for the real economy and for climate change relief. So $106 billion in emergency funding for the Middle East and Ukraine, and it's all been supplementals. There's no oversight by Congress. And they don't look at these budgets and see how the war profiteering and the corporations are just ripping us off. And 60 Minutes has done amazing work on this. So has the Quincy Institute. But it allows for these war crimes. Yemen was a war crime. And $8 billion was shoved through by Mike Pompeo and Trump, bypassing Congress completely unconstitutionally. And Mike Lee and Senator Sanders shut that down because hundreds and hundreds of thousands of children were dying unnecessarily under the hail of bombs that no congressperson ever approved. And what Linda Bilmes says is when you bypass Congress, that's a complete collapse of democracy. That's pure trickle-down fascism. And that's why every Democrat on the House Budget Committee, when Trump did this in 2017, which Biden just did in December, they said, here's our act. This is unconstitutional. We want it filibustered. We're going to go to court. And you're not calling it out. I want you to call it out because Senator Chris Van Hollen is calling it out, and Elizabeth Warren is calling it out. Senator Sanders is calling it out. The Democratic senator from Vermont is calling it out. There's a total of 18 U.S. senators who are Democrats who are saying do not bypass Congress because we have a right to oversight and put conditions. Last thing I'm going to say is I had a teacher, Larry Lindsay, in college. He became economic advisor for Bush. He said that the Iraq war is going to cost $200 billion. They sent him out on a rail. Linda Bilmes, who's now writing this new book and report, who you should have on your show, wrote a book with Joe Stiglitz just 6 years into the Iraq war and said it's $4 trillion is what it's costing us. So they undersold that to give us the Bush tax cuts and then all the austerity that we got. And they're deeply tied together. This is trickle-down fascism.
Yeah, excellent
and if
point.
You brought in,
excellent point. And I agree with you and all of the Democratic senators that, Congress should have the final say on all appropriations. It's right there in the Constitution. It's fairly clear. Now, the president does have some discretion on what he does with the stuff that's already been bought and paid for. But, when we're talking about foreign wars, particularly undeclared foreign wars, I think that it's kind of a different issue. Patrick, thank you for the call.